before I can get into the next set of games, I've had some time to think about it, and there's 3 Robot Masters that I need to talk about once more. And those are Hyperstorm H, Megawater S, and Bubble Man. Going forward, I plan to harshly criticize Robot Masters that have instant death gimmicks in their fights, so it's only fair to revisit these 3 because they do have instant death gimmicks in their fights. In the case of Bubble Man and Megawater S, it's not really something that comes into play in their fight. They do have spikes in the arena, but it's extremely unlikely that you're going to accidentally hit them. More likely you would have to purposely run into them. With Bubble Man's being at the very top of the screen, you'd have to hold the jump button down until you smash into the spikes. And Megawater S, they're underneath his platform in the center, and he doesn't do anything to get you to go under there. He just gets you off of his platform, off to the side. Due to this, I could probably bump Megawater S down to the top of the C tier. It effectively doesn't change anything. Bubble Man, I still think is a better fight than Shadow Man, so we're going to leave him alone. But then we have Hyperstorm H. Like, his gimmick is trying to push you into the spikes. It's pretty easy to avoid, but he is kind of tricky about it too, and really trying to get you into him, so I'm going to have to bump him down to the bottom of the B tier. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the Mega Man 4 Robot Masters. First up is Bright Man, and let's talk about his Game Boy appearance. He really has just 3 ways to attack you. He'll either try to jump on you, he'll try to shoot you with a spread of bullets that I believe go in the same pattern every time, and he'll try to use his flash stopper weapon to freeze you in place while he does one of the other 2 attacks, and he seems to do it pretty randomly. He's weak to the Rain Flush, which is Toadman's weapon, and it deals 6 damage to him each time it hits, which is a good thing because that weapon uses up a lot of energy. Now, he also appears in the Game Gear version of the game. That's right, you heard me, Game Gear. There was a Game Gear game that Capcom, a Japanese company, had a British company develop, while another British company published it exclusively in the US. Makes no sense. Anyway, the game's terrible, whereas a lot of people incorrectly assume the Game Boy games are just crapified NES games made for the Game Boy screen. The Game Gear game actually is NES games levels screen crunched into Game Gear, but they didn't shrink any of the sprites. They kept the size, so what you have is the NES screens, but you can only see a portion of it at a time, and it's not very good. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about it, but there are 2 Mega Man 4 Robot Masters that appear in that game. Bright Man is one of them, and despite Toadman being the other one, you can't actually fight Bright Man with the Rain Flush, because Toadman is part of the Cossack Castle. For some reason they reused Cossack's Castle. Yeah, the castle is made up of 3 Robot Master stages. I don't want to go into any more detail really about the Game Gear game, but yeah, you cannot fight Toadman until Brightman's already been defeated, and there are no Robot Master rematches, so he's not weak to the Rain Flush in that game. Instead, he's weak to the Star Crash. Wait. Sorry, it's called the Crash Weapon, which is Starman's weapon. And he can be difficult to hit with it. He tends to jump around a lot more than he does in the Game Boy version, and you may have also noticed from the footage that he moves at like 200% his normal speed. All of the Robot Masters in the Game Gear version do this. It's really weird. It's not a good fight. I don't recommend it. On normal version, he does actually do very little damage when he makes contact with you. But I recorded my footage on difficult because they actually have less attacks on normal. I don't know exactly what Brightman doesn't do on normal. It might be the bullet spread if I had to guess. But he still moves at the same speed and still jumps a lot. So that brings us to the NES version. And I don't like Brightman. I'm going to be honest here. He is hard-coded to use the Flash Stopper at certain pips in his health. Thankfully, there is an exploit that allows you to skip those pips by, as you'll see in my footage, hitting him once or twice with the Mega Buster and then using your Rain Flush, which deals 4 damage in the NES version. And then he'll just never use it because the Rain Flush actually does just enough damage that it triggers every single pip on his health bar that causes him to use Flash Stopper if you don't do damage from any other source. So if you do a little bit of damage first, then it's going to skip over every single pip. This is a terrible way to program a boss. It basically punishes you for using his weakness. And Flash Stopper is really overpowered. It stops you in place no matter where you are, on the ground or in the air. And as far as I know, the only way for it to wear off is for him to hit you, either with his bullets or by landing on you. Neither one is a good scenario in Mega Man 4 because everything does so much damage to you. Contact damage is insane in that game, and his bullets deal almost as much damage, probably do deal as much damage. It's a bad fight, and for this reason, gotta put my homeboy Brightman down in the D tier. Definitely below Gutsman. Not quite as bad as Electman and Quickman, but it's... yeah, it is real close. No, I'm going to put him at the top of the F tier. Next up is Dive Man. Now, Dive Man has 2 ways to attack you. He doesn't walk around, he doesn't jump. But he does try and shoot some missiles that will home at you. And failing that, he will shoot himself as a missile at you, horizontally across the screen along the floor. And that's his whole gimmick. He tries to do contact damage to you if he can't shoot you with his missiles. His weakness is the Skull Barrier, which deals 3 damage on the Game Boy version. And almost as if they knew this was a bad idea, he does have a secondary weakness in the Dust Crusher, which also deals 3 damage on the Game Boy version. The Skull Barrier does have a fair amount of energy, but since one hit from either him or his missiles will destroy the barrier, you can easily go through all your energy really quickly. It makes it really hard to hit this boss with his main weakness, and also really hard to not get hit by him. In the NES version, the fight is basically the same, except Skull Barrier deals 4 damage to him instead of 3. Dust Crusher still does 3 damage to him, so it's a pretty good secondary weakness if you'd rather keep your distance. It just deals less damage to him. I think it's better in the Game Boy version where it feels almost like they knew it was a mistake to have him be weak to the skull barrier. But I digress. Yeah, those are some flaws, like some pretty major flaws. Like with Brightman, the contact damage in this game is insane. So, he's gonna be pretty low. Probably... probably above Cutman and below Airman. I had to think about that for a second and was like, is it worse than having 2 shots and then you're out of ammo? And I decided no, it's not. But it's still pretty bad. Next up is Drill Man. Now it's hard for me to talk about Drill Man for the Game Boy without first talking about the NES version, but I'm gonna make a shot at it because I'd rather save my talk about the NES version for last, since that's the version I am actually ranking all of these Robot Masters on. But in the Game Boy version of the game, we see that he's got basically 2 methods of attack. First thing is he will dive into the ground, and after a few seconds, he will try and come up at your location, which can easily be dodged by just staying on the move. And then usually after he comes up, he can either go back down and try it again, or he may start walking left and right, shooting shooting drill bombs at you as he does so. His weakness is the dive missiles, which is pretty good, because with the fact that he might jump up to start drilling into the ground, it will home if it misses him when you take a shot because he jumped up. And I would actually probably rate the Game Boy version a little bit higher. And the reason for that is because if we talk about the NES version, the fight is basically the same except when he begins to drill, he's no longer able to be damaged. Your dive missiles are going to bounce off of him. This is not the way it is in the Game Boy version. You could still hit him until he fully disappears under the ground. And it also feels like in the NES version that he stays underground longer. And because of all this, I feel like he has earned a place just above Shadow Man in the C tier. Thanks for wasting all my time, Drill Man. Next up we have Dust Man. And his normal weakness does not appear in the Game Boy game that he is in, which is Mega Man 3 for the Game Boy. So instead, he is weak to the Drill Bomb. And that in itself feels like it's not really much of a weakness, because it only deals 2 damage to him, which is actually less damage than a fully charged Mega Buster shot will do to him. And no other weapon does any more than 1 damage to him, so it's not like there's a secondary weakness here. However, he basically does 2 things. He's either going to suck and try and pull you in, or he's going to shoot dust blobs at you, which will, once it reaches your location, if you try to jump over it, explode into the diagonal directions. It's basically pretty easy to dodge. You just jump when it gets close and you harmlessly jump over it. You don't even have to move left or right, you just jump straight up. And then pummel at him with drill bombs. In the NES version, His weakness is actually the ring boomerang, which deals 4 damage to him. And if you get an ideal pattern, he's never going to suck. He's never going to jump around to change positions. He's just going to shoot dust at you while you're in range to hit him with the ring boomerang. He's a pretty easy fight. He's not a very interesting fight as a result of that, though. But there's nothing really inherently wrong with the fight, so I think I will have to put him above Hyperstorm H over here. Next up is Pharaoh Man. Oh, Pharaoh Man, Pharaoh Man, Pharaoh Man. If only this were a Buster-only tier list, I could say nice things about you. But unfortunately, it's not. I'm judging every Robot Master by their weakness. So before I reveal what his weakness is, but you're probably going to see it in the footage anyway, I'll talk about his attacks. He likes to jump around a lot. He doesn't move super fast, but he does move kind of quickly. He can do short hops, he can do big hops. Jumping around is what he likes to do. And he also likes to throw small Pharaoh shots at you while he's jumping. Sometimes he will stop to charge up a Pharaoh shot that is the same height as him, that just moves out horizontally across the screen. And that's all he really does for attacks. It's definitely more interesting to Buster him. But with his weakness, there's not really a whole lot else I can say. His weakness is the Flash Stopper. He is the only Robot Master that is frozen by it. So despite the fact that it only deals 1 damage to everything, including other Robot Masters, you can get 7 shots off before it wears off. So technically it deals 7 damage to him. And also, you're probably mashing the attack button because the Flash Stopper only uses up energy once it's activated rather than with each shot you take. So if you're mashing fast enough, Pharaoh Man's never going to move again in the fight. It is pathetic. And the only other thing I can really say is that I guess he does kind of have a secondary weakness in Dust Crusher and Rain Flush, both dealing 2 damage each, but it's not really enough, and it's also less than the Mega Buster will deal to him with a fully charged shot. And this is all true in the Game Boy version as well, except instead of Dust Crusher dealing 2 damage, since Dustman's not in Mega Man 4 with him, it is the Crystal Eye that deals 2 damage, and also the Rain Flush, which is still less than the fully charged Mega Buster shot deals to him. I'm sorry, Pharaoh Man, you have a really cool design, and I think your fight is more interesting to Buster, but yeah, you're top of the F tier there, buddy. You're super easy, but your fight is super dumb. Next up is Ringman. Now, Ringman is an interesting fight because he has a very set-in-stone pattern. On the Game Boy version, he will shoot a ring at you from the ground, which will go just a little bit past where you're currently standing when he fires it, which means you have to jump backward to avoid it. And then he will jump in the air and shoot a ring diagonally towards your location. And of course, when he lands, he will walk over to the opposite side of the screen, and once he reaches the wall, he will repeat the pattern ad infinitum, or whatever that phrase is. I should not use phrases that I'm not certain is the correct phrase. But anyway, he is weak to the Pharaoh Shot in Mega Man 4 for Game Boy, which deals 2 damage with a normal shot and 6 damage when charged up. He also takes 2 damage to the rain flush and 2 to the charge kick. But why would you bother when you got the Pharaoh shot? It's awesome. He does move pretty fast, so it's a difficult fight to not get hit by, but it's not too difficult to fight him and beat him with a weakness, even if you do get hit a lot, just because it does do a ton of damage to him. In the NES version, his pattern is slightly different. He does still open by throwing a boomerang horizontally at ground level to just past your current location when he throws it, requiring you to jump backward to avoid damage from it. But when he jumps up afterward, instead of throwing it diagonally downward at you, he will throw it horizontally from where he is in the air. Which means it's a bit easier to avoid that second hit. And then he will, as in the Game Boy version, land and then walk to the opposite side of the screen and begin the pattern anew. In the NES version, he does not have any secondary weaknesses, but he does still take 2 damage from a regular Pharaoh shot and 6 damage from a charged one. I actually do like Ringman's fight quite a bit. The only other thing to say here is I didn't notice this ever happening in the Game Boy version, but in the NES version, while he's walking across the screen, if you shoot him with a Pharaoh shot, or just fire one to start charging it up, he will counter with another ring, and then continue along to the rest of the other side of the screen. But I do like his fight quite a bit. It's not too bad to fight with the special weapon. It doesn't kill him too quickly. It doesn't make him trivial. However, even without it, he's not impossible. His pattern is difficult to dodge, but very doable. It's a satisfying fight once you do learn how his pattern works and how to dodge it. So I think I would actually put it above Time Man in the A tier. Next up is Skullman. On the Game Boy version, he will fire off a volley of shots that, for some reason, are spaced too closely together and move too quickly to actually be able to dodge. It does seem like he always shoots 3 forward and then 3 diagonally upward, but even if it's always that pattern, it's still almost impossible to dodge, because even jumping over the 3, you're almost certainly going to get hit by the diagonally moving ones, and this is an attack I'm not very fond of. He'll also jump across the room to get to you if he wants to, or he will use the skull barrier and just stand still while that blocks all your shots, and then as soon as it wears off, he will quickly march over to your location. And that's how he attacks. He is weak to the Dust Crusher, which deals 3 damage to him. On the NES version, the Dust Crusher deals 4 damage to him, and the fight is basically the same, except the volley of shots he fires. First off, if it's horizontal or diagonally, it depends on whether you're jumping over a shot or not. And they're spaced further apart, and they move slower, so they're actually dodgeable. In the NES version, it's not a bad fight. So I would probably put it above Hardman in the B tier. Yeah, that feels good right there. And our last Mega Man 4 Robot Master to talk about is Toadman. In the Game Boy version, actually in all versions of the game, he really only does 2 things. He tries to jump on you, And failing that, he will do a little dance to summon a Rain Flush, which is an unavoidable screen attack. Because of this, his weakness is, in the Game Boy version, his AI. I'm serious, he doesn't actually have a weakness. He'll take 3 damage from a fully charged Mega Buster shot, 2 damage from his own weapon, and 2 damage from the Napalm Bomb. And aside from the Mega Buster, you can only use the other 2 weapons that deal more than 1 damage to him in the rematches. So yeah, his weakness is his AI. If you hit him with a fully charged Mega Buster shot, or I assume with his quote-unquote weakness, it interrupts his attempt to use Rain Flush, and he will try to jump on you again. And you can just sidestep him and hit him again. And it takes him long enough to jump that you can fully charge your Mega Buster every time, and just in a continuous pattern. He dies really fast, he's very not threatening, and that's it. And I would pretty much say the same about his NES counterpart, with the exception that Drill Bomb is his weakness, which both the drill and the explosion deal 4 damage to him, but otherwise the fight's the same. And then there's the Game Gear version, which is actually kind of redeeming for him. He moves at like 200% speed, just like Brightman did, but he actually jumps a lot more, and it seems it's kind of random how many times he jumps before he tries to summon a rain weapon, as it's called in this game. But it's not really any more difficult, even though he does move really fast and jump a lot more, because all you do is just keep sidestepping him until he does decide to try and use the rain weapon, and that's when you hit him with the wave weapon, which deals 5 damage to him. Which is actually a pretty good weakness for him, because the only time you want to hit him is when he's on the ground trying to hit you with his weapon. He is more threatening in the Game Gear version, though, especially if you're playing on difficult, where the contact damage is very real. But unfortunately for Toadman, we are not judging him based on the Game Gear version. We are judging him based on the NES version, and he is just a laughable fight. Not as bad as Quickman, but that's not a good fight. Like, even Bustering, it's like, if it was just his weakness that did it, I could in good conscience put him up here with Pharaoh Man. But the Mega Buster also does this to him in all versions of the game. You don't have to hit him with his weakness. Toadman, you really are the most pathetic Robot Master. And that's going to do it for the Robot Masters of Mega Man 4.